Hello friends, it's Meg, and today I'm going to talk to you guys about my weekly reset routine. In this video, I'll be talking about what a weekly reflection is, why you should do it, and how I do it so that you can get started as well. So let's get into it. So what is a weekly reflection? A weekly reflection is the act of reviewing the past week to assess how the week went. It's a great way to figure out where you've been so that you can figure out where you're going. I talked a lot about this concept in my yearly reset video. If you haven't checked that out already, I'll link it up in the cards above so you can check it out. But this act of reflecting on the past so that you can figure out where you're trying to go is really important in order to make sure that you're making headway in the things that you actually care about. This leads me to talk about why you should do a weekly reflection. Weekly reflections have many benefits. The first one being that you can have a more proactive approach to life rather than a reactive one. What I mean by this is oftentimes when we don't take the time to reflect on what we've done and where we're headed, we often fall into the trap of just accepting everything that's coming our way and then processing them as they come, which is a very reactive way to live life. But when you take the time to reflect and figure out, what you've done and where you're headed, you're more likely to be able to discern if you're going in the right direction or not. Which leads me to my second point about why you should do a weekly reflection, and that is that you can keep track of your goals better. Because you're taking the time to take inventory of what you did and what you're going to do, you're more likely to catch yourself when you're about to do something that's not actually helping you move the needle forward. We might be the most productive person on the earth for that 1 week, but we might actually be doing the wrong things, and when you look back on it, you're like, wait, I did all of these things and they meant nothing because they actually didn't move the needle forward in terms of what I wanted to do in life. And that could be really devastating. So it's really important to check back in with yourself and figure out where you're charting your course and making sure that you're on the right path to do the things that actually matter to you. And that's why I think weekly reflections are really important for everyone. All right, so now that I've talked about what a weekly reflection is and why it's important, let's talk about how you can actually do this. And this is just how I do it, and so you don't have to take 100% of what I'm doing. You can take bits and pieces here and there that matter to you, that make sense to you. Maybe incorporate some other people's weekly reflection routines and combine them. Do what works best for you. But I just wanted to share what I do as a way to give you a starting point. So my weekly reflection has two parts: the reflecting portion and the clarifying portion. Let's start with the reflection portion. The reflection portion, as I've talked about extensively in the beginning of the video, is really where you figure out what you were doing the last week. What have you done this week that led you to where you are right now? And so the questions I ask myself are, what were some highlights from last week? What were some challenges from last week? Was I able to meet my goal this week? Why or why not? Let's break down each of the questions. This is a great way for you to acknowledge the wins that you had and really think about the good things that happened in this past week, because a lot of times when we're on the go, getting things done, busy with our everyday life, we kind of forget to give ourselves credit for the things that we were able to accomplish or the things that we really enjoyed. And so it's a great way for me, at least, to slow down at the beginning of each week to reflect on what were some cool things that happened in the last week that I want to remember. So that's what the highlight section is for. The second question has a similar effect in that it's a way for me to kind of note down the things that were hard for me that week, to give myself credit for the fact that I overcame them or I'm working on it. But it's okay if you are not working on it, you're not over it yet, it's just something that you're struggling with. It's just a good way for you to note down these things without being judgmental to yourself. So just write down anything that came up that was challenging for you. And the last question isn't meant to make you feel guilty if you weren't able to meet the goal. If anything, it's a place for you to figure out why you weren't able to meet the goal. The more important part of the question is the why or why not portion, because maybe you were able to meet your goal. Great. Then why were you able to meet your goal so that you can set goals that you can meet in the future as well? Maybe you did something different this week that you could carry forward into the next week. And if you weren't able to meet your goal this week, okay, that's fine. Why do you think it was? was. Was the goal too big? Was the goal too broad? Was it too challenging? By taking the time to assess your goals and think about why you were able to achieve them or why you weren't able to achieve them, it helps you iterate on your process of creating goals for yourself so that you can create a better system for yourself going forward. And so if you weren't able to meet your goal from last week, don't stress about it. It's not a big deal. This question is not meant to make you feel guilty or attack you for not being able to meet them. It's just a way for you to kind of objectively look at what you did and be like, okay, so what worked and what didn't. Now let's move on to the second part of my reflection, which is the clarifying portion. The first thing I like to do when I'm in the clarify section is to mind dump everything that's on my mind, whether that be tasks, thoughts, everything that's really on my mind that like I just need to get out, I get it out. And this is an important part of the weekly reflection routine because it's a great way for you to just kind of create a blank slate for yourself and offload everything that's like on your mind onto an external source. And once I've done that and I have created a clean slate for myself, that's when I say, okay, what kind of goal do I want for this week? And the reason I do this in this order is because sometimes the goals that we set for ourselves end up being like the most urgent thing, which might not necessarily be the most important thing. Just because something has a looming deadline doesn't make that necessarily important, right? So by offloading everything in my head that I have to keep track of or want to keep track of into an external system and I have a blank slate, that's when I can really think about, okay, what's important to me right now and what do I want to accomplish this week? And so that's when I set my weekly goal. And that's really it for the weekly reflection routine for me. I know a lot of other people do a much more extensive routine, but I just found that for me, simple is best. I found that when I tried to force myself into doing like a long reflection, I would kind of resist doing the reflection and then it kind of defeated the purpose of having a reflection time in the first place. So that's why I keep it very short and simple. For me, my weekly reflection day is Sunday. So I start my weeks on Sundays and that's when I like to reflect on the last week and then think about what it's coming up in the next week. So Sundays are a great day for me, but it might be Mondays for you, Saturdays for you. Could be any day of the week, really, whatever works for you. Just make sure that you do it consistently. I hope everything was clear. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments down below so I can answer them for you. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!